Welcome back to our second video in this series of dealing with stress during COVID-19. Again, we're going to be looking at things that are stress management techniques as a whole and talking about why they're significant and important and we can apply during this COVID-19 situation. So today we're going to do a little recap from what we talked about in video 1, and then we're going to go talking about what the circle of influence versus concern is, why that's important, why it'll be impactful during stressful times. And then we're going to go through a bunch of different stress management techniques that are well researched and shown to be able to help during stress. So first off, last video, we talked about what is stress, identified what it is, and that it is something that our body has a reaction to something in the environment or around us. We talked about the stress indicators that we get in the body, the mind, our emotions, and our behaviors. And this is the first step in to be able to do stress management, is identifying what those are for you. Lastly, we went through FACE COVID, which was an acronym for different things that are important to be able to manage stress. Now, FACE was one of the most key things, which is focus on what's in your control, acknowledge your thoughts and feelings. This is where we're compassionate with ourselves. Come back into our body, which is grounding ourselves. E, engage in what you're doing, which is being mindful, aware of what's happening. So now we're going to be focusing on the F, focus on what's in your control. And there's a certain model I want to go over to talk about this. It's a model of the circle of influence and the circle of concern. Now, as you can see on this model, the small circle is the circle of control. There's a circle a little bit bigger, that's your circle of influence. And then one that's even bigger, that's your circle of control. Now, each one of these circles are really important to note. So, what's in our control is going to be important to know what's in there. And the thing that you have the most control over, if you can't guess it, your behaviors, the way that you act, that truly falls into the circle of control. It's what you have control over. Okay, so there's other things that can fall in the circle as well. But as we go out to the next circle, the circle of influence, where we have influence, we might have influence if we're a boss, we might have influence if we're a parent, we might have influence if we sit on a board or we volunteer somewhere. Right? We have influence in different areas, we have influence with different people. The influence is where we can make impacts, but we don't have 100% control over it. That's important to note, and we'll come back to in a moment. The last circle, circle of what you don't have control over, where your concern is. This circle is a circle that is filled with many things. Things like death and COVID-19 and all the crime that's out there necessarily. There's a lot that happens. Storms that come in, Mother Nature. These are in your circle of concern. You don't have control over them. Now, let's look at this for a moment. Oftentimes when I meet people that have high levels of stress, what I find is they have their focus on that circle of concern. So, for example, if I'm a parent and I'm working with my kids and I want my kids to be in school and it's terrible that they're at home if I feel that way, and it's stressing me out because I need them at school. Well, the fact that I'm focused on them needing to be at school and out of the house is out of my control. That's in a circle of concern, because during the COVID-19, schools are out. And with the schools being out, we can't have them in school. So having them go back to school and be in that building and not at home, not in your control. The more you focus on that, the more you're going to feel frustrated, stressed, and your outcomes are going to go down. You're not going to be very effective. So the fact is if you feel a high level of stress, high level of frustration, you feel like you're hitting your head against the wall, it's probably because you are. It's probably because you're putting your focus, your time, your energy, all of your actions into something you don't have control over, which is infuriating. You're not going to make progress. So what we're wanting to do is move away from the things we don't have control over We'll identify what that is. We can write it into that circle of concern saying, okay, I want my children into school. That's my circle of concern. Now, what do I have control over? What you have control over is how you're going to parent during this time, or possibly solutions of getting the kids the care they need if you have to work or do other things. So you focus in on what do you have control over in this moment. How can you do things? So for example, in my house, my kids are home. So what we did is we had a family meeting about it. We talked about what it's going to look like. I gave them my schedule. They know when I'm going to be working, when I'm not working. They know that they can come to me during breaks and after work for school questions, things they're having troubles with, and I will help them at that time. So we came up with a schedule. We came up with a structure. We identified the things that were within our control. And we had a lot of success with doing that. But that's going to be different for everybody in their homes. Again, this circle and why it's so important is because when you're feeling so frustrated, you're feeling like you're not getting anywhere, it's probably because you're focused on that circle of concern. Reshift. Identify what that is in the concern and see what you have control over. And as you focus more on what's in your control and what you actually can impact, your circle of influence actually broadens. It gets bigger, and your influence can have more great positive impacts. The more you focus on that circle of concern, that circle of influence actually starts shrinking because we lose influence. It's the reality of when someone has to be around you, if you're so focused on what's in your concern, people grow frustrated because you're not getting a lot done. You might be a bit negative, and so they start distancing. They want to focus in other areas. So your influence shrinks. We want to broaden that influence. We want to be impactful. So again, we want to focus on what's in our control, that circle of control. So, activity here, next time you're feeling stressed, see where your focus is. Next time you're frustrated, see where your focus is. See if you can bring it back into something that's in your control. So our next area we're going to talk about is we're going to go through a list of different ideas and things that you can do. It's not all encompassing, but it'll have a lot of different things that you can do to do stress management. So, first off, we're going to go through this list, but I want you to think what actually is appropriate for you. What's going to work in your home? What's going to work in your life? Because it's not going to be the same for everyone. And when we're done going through this list for this video, I'd really love for you to sit down and come up with things that are worthwhile for you to do, or things that make sense for you to bring your stress down. So let's start with number one, physical activity. Physical activity is critical when we have stress. It's kind of like I was sharing with that rubber band earlier. When we have lots of stress, it starts building, it creates tension all over in the body, the organs, the mind. It's creating all kinds of negative side effects in our body. When we go out and we have physical activity, and I'm not talking about just exercise, right? You don't have to go to the gym to get physical activity. It could be just a walk around the block. It could be parking farther away from the store so you get more steps in. Anywhere where we can move the body, what you're doing is you're helping the body be able to remove some of the stress and the tension within. So more physical activity, we can apply an increase in the day, an increase in our lives, the more we move the stress out of the body. So that's a big one. Find ways that you increase your physical activity. It's a lot like a car, right? If anyone knows about a car, if you let it just sit and you don't let it go anywhere, it starts to not work as well. It has problems. Things rust inside, or the liquids will start not working the way they should within the car. The car is meant to be moving. Same thing with our bodies. Our bodies are meant to move. And if we're not moving them, they aren't doing so well. There's literally something they call a sitting disease that has negative impacts on the body. We want to be moving. The body literally is made to move. In fact, it's so fascinating. A lot of times when you get up in the morning, especially people that are getting older like myself, I wake up and everything just hurts, and I go to move and the joints hurt, the back hurts, the legs hurt. But once you start moving, it starts feeling better. Because what's happening, since the body's made to move, your joints create a natural lubricant inside. But it doesn't happen till you move. So, movement is lotion for the joints, the body, the internal side. Once we start moving, it helps that body. So physical activity is a really, really big one in dealing with stress management. Move, do things, find ways that work within your world, that work in your home, that work for your lifestyle to increase movement. The next one we're going to talk about is healthy eating. And you might say, what does healthy eating have anything to do with stress management? Well, I'm going to use my analogy again about the cars. I remember a good friend of mine one time, he had gone out and he had accidentally put gasoline in a diesel truck. Now, anybody that knows what happens there, it's not pretty. It didn't run the way it was supposed to, and it's very bad for the engine. It's the same exact thing. What we put into our body has a big impact. If we put things like processed foods into our body that don't process well within because of what they put in those processed foods and what they take out of the processed foods that's good for you, your body is struggling to operate. So it actually creates a stress in the body. Versus when we put the things in our body that the body needs and that is a good fuel for our body, so our vegetables, our fruits, right, our grains, as we put those into the body, it allows the body to be able to operate the way it should. So, eating things like processed foods, increasing stress in the body. Eating healthy things like our fruits and vegetables, helping decrease some of that stress in the body, and we get all the positive impacts and nutrients that that food gives us. Our next one is breathing. Now, breathing is one of the simplest ways that you can do stress management. Because most situations, you can't just run off and do physical activity, right? If you're having this difficult conversation maybe with someone or the stressful situation, you can't just be like, okay, I'm gonna go run. You can't do that all the time. But a breath, you can take. And it's a really cool thing what happens as we increase our breath, as we inhale, we exhale, now increase the oxygen into the body, which then goes into our blood flow, which impacts everything in the body. In fact, I encourage most people, if you have stressful situations, one of the fastest, quickest, easiest things you can do in that moment is first recognize you're having stress, and then take a nice deep breath, and exhale that deep breath. It'll bring your stress down quickly. And you can do like 3 of those, and no big deal. You can do them where people don't notice too much. You can and breathe out, right? It's not a huge deal to be able to do that. Now, most people though, especially when we're stressed, we do very shallow breathing, which decreases the amount of oxygen that's getting into our body. We need to increase that oxygen. So, again, breathing, there's lots of different ways that you can find online that people promote on how to do a breath. Whatever's comfortable for you is fine. But what you want to do is you want a nice deep breath in, and that breath should be moving both the chest cavity as well as the abdominal cavity. It's a nice big breath. In fact, when I teach people, I normally have them put hands on both their abdomen right here as well as their chest, and when they take in that breath, make sure both are moving. And then you hold for a moment, and you slowly let that breath out. Try it with me. Can you feel the increase of oxygen in the blood? Can you feel some of the stress just disengage from the body? That's the power of the breath. So that's quick, fast, easy to add a breath to be able to deal with stress. Sometimes we end up in spots where we have a lot of stress and we just need to step away from it. If you can, take a break. Go away for a little bit. You know, it allows you to take a breath, allows you to take a walk. If you can, take a break. This can be done in places like the home. We don't have to stay engaged. In fact, I remember one time I was working with a client who was struggling with some marriage issues. And I was talking with him, and he was dealing with anger and the stress within some of those situations you'd find with his spouse. So I talked to him about the ability to just walk away, take a break, take a breath, recollect yourself, right? Starts re-engaging back that frontal lobe so we make good choices, allows us to think through the situation, and then come back. When he came back and was seeing me the next time, he said, "Oh my gosh, that made a huge difference. All my life I thought I had to stay engaged. I didn't know I could just step away for a little bit, collect myself, and come back. I thought he always had to stay engaged." But this can apply to our children, spouses, friends, family members, is recognizing, is it okay to take a break here? Be clear, be concise about it, take a break, calm down, right? When it's appropriate, take a break. Sometimes when we have lots of stress, we forget how critical and important it is to have a pleasant activity. We start engaging in everything that has to be done, and we overwhelm ourselves and overload ourselves, and we just keep going and going, and we don't realize that that is adding so much stress to the body. So it's important to note, to identify, find the time to do a pleasant activity, even if it's a short one. Do something pleasurable, something to take your mind off some stressors. It's so critical that I'd even encourage you to plan it within the day. Always make time for some type of little pleasant activity, maybe even a big one, right? Maybe you have a stressful week and so you go fishing for the weekend, or you go to some show or something. But take the time to do a pleasant activity. Me personally, I love finding time to go rock collecting or fishing or hanging out with my kids and being outdoors. So we find those times. We get out, we do things. But what's your pleasant activity, and how do you schedule it into your time? We can also talk with someone, and that might be a counselor if we need a counselor or professional. It might also be a friend, a family member, but talking with someone can be helpful. Now, that's not to be confused of gossiping or going on and on and on and on about something negative and complaining. When we talk to someone, we normally want to just vent what the situation is, explain it. Then we want to move to, what do we need to do about it, if anything, right? Is it just that we needed to get off our chest and explain to someone and move on? Okay, we'll be clear about that. Get it off your chest and let's move on. If it's something we need a solution, get it off your chest, explain what you need to explain, and then let's figure out, what do we do about this? Because if you go on and on and on, complaining or gossiping, it's actually going to increase stress, not decrease stress. Sometimes stress can be from a very specific situation. And so we want to go in and we want to address what the issue or the problem is. This might be, maybe something's broken in the house and we just need to go fix it. It might be that we need to go have a difficult conversation with someone. But if we ignore these things, normally the problem gets worse. We want to go address it, deal with the issue, deal with the situation, resolve it, and that can help bring down stress. So don't procrastinate it, get to it, make it happen, get it done. Acceptance is also something that can be really, really impactful. We touched on this in video 1, and if you're interested, you can go into our other videos, not in these 4 video series, but another video I have that's specifically on acceptance and how important and impactful that can be. Acceptance is something we can apply to others, and we can apply to oneself. Acceptance is really important in stressful situations. We need to be able to accept people for who they are, what's happening, right? We want to take out our judgment. We want to be able to apply just that we recognize what's happening and we can be there, we can have empathy for it. But we also want to do that to ourselves. We want to accept ourselves for who we are, what we are, not judging ourselves. That increases stress. We can accept who we are, what our thoughts are, what our emotions, what's happening. That'll help bring down stress. So for example, maybe I feel fear of what's happening in the community. And I have that fear, and sometimes maybe people tell me I'm not supposed to have this fear, and I start thinking negatively about myself on having fear. But it's a natural, normal response to something like a worldwide pandemic. It's okay to have that fear. It's okay to feel that way. I don't have to judge it. I can accept who I am, where I'm at, a humanness of me, and be okay with it. That, as you apply it to yourself, you'll feel this sense of centeredness or calmness, and it can be very impactful. Another one that we can apply during this time of COVID-19 or any time that we're feeling stress is making sure that we schedule in quality family time. This can look like a meeting, a weekly meeting where we look at what's going on in the week. It can look like times where we all get together and do something fun, like go to the park, take a walk, go on an extracurricular activity, play some games, whatever it is, but spending quality family time. And I've met families where they don't schedule this in and everybody's disconnected and going in their different ways. But it's important to take the time to schedule it in, even if it's once a week or a few times a week, to have that quality family time that everybody's kind of coming together, even if it's just about to talk and seeing what's going on. Let's schedule it in, find time to hold the family together. We also want to avoid things like drugs, alcohol, substance abuse, substance use. We don't want to be taking those things at this time to try to deal with stress because it actually can have an adverse effect. It's one thing to drink a glass of wine with our dinner, it's another thing to be drinking a whole bottle of wine because I feel very anxious and very stressed and I can't connect with others, right? I'm dealing with the problem in an adverse way and not actually dealing with what's actually happening and finding a solution for it. Other things we can do: spend time with a pet, mindfulness, we talked about that earlier, using music, having a schedule, making sure we have structure. Don't let go of structure just because either you're working from home or you don't have a job right now or your kid's home. Make sure that we have structure and systems in place. Follow something to keep you moving and going. Give normalcy. Identify a support group. There's lots of support groups out there right now. And there's people that want to be able to help you and support you. Find connections with others. Find ways to connect with others. It might need to be virtually right now, and that's okay. Figure that out. Find ways to connect though. And one last item I'll touch on is being positive in the mind, which we're going to talk about in the next class, but also laughing. Find the time to laugh. Pull something up that is humorous, right? Find a joke, find a video. Take the time to laugh. Hopefully this gave you a list of ideas. Again, it's not all encompassing. There's lots more things you could do for stress management, but hopefully this gets you going with some things that you might be able to start applying stress management techniques in your own life. Thanks for joining us in this video, and we'll look forward to talking to you in video 3.